Good morning.
Good morning.
Please rise and body your spirit as we sing Come, Come, Whoever You Are, number 188. And we'll split this between two sections. Let's see. Aviva will lead this section and I will lead this section.
We'll sing it in unison a couple
Say it in
times.
unison 2 times and then break into parts.
Come,
come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. Come, whoever you are, wanderer, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. Thank you. Be seated. Welcome, one and all, to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Hillsborough, where we constantly strive to be an open, welcoming community and a loving, supportive community. We don't require that we all adhere to one specific creed or common set of religious beliefs or practices. Rather, we are a covenant community committed to loving and supporting one another in our ongoing individual, lifelong quest for truth, higher truth, and meaning in the matters of personal faith. So whoever you are, member, guest, or friend, for whatever reason guided you to join us today, either in person or online, we welcome you. My name is Dave Yelton, and I'm the worship associate for today's service. I want to thank everyone who's made this worship experience possible. I'll start with thanking our gifted music director and worship team leader, Aviva Enoch, coordinating all the music today. And I was going to thank Kim Freeman, but she's under the weather, so she was not going to be joining us for a piece of special music that they were working out. We also want to acknowledge our religious exploration teachers, all their important guidance for our youngest members. And I thank Amy Dark for editing and producing our order of service, and A.C. Tharrington for handing it out at the door. Thanks Steve Mahaley and today Avery Garner for our technical crew to broadcast our service. And many others. There's so many people behind the scenes. We've got finance people, government people, building grounds, stewardship, everybody. It takes quite a crew to hold this congregation together. I recall something from a science class one time that said the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think that holds true with all the parts that function here that hold us all together in a special way. It's now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today, Sarah Clark Farnell. She's a native of North Carolina. I was talking with her back. She was born in Elizabeth City and grew up later in Chapel Hill. She's currently a resident of Chapel Hill. She's a graduate of the Chicago Theological Seminary. She's currently a chaplain intern at Duke University Hospital. She's a member of the community church in Chapel Hill, and she lives in Chapel Hill with her partner. There are 3 kids. They're 3 kids and 3 cats. She'll talk to you about cats after the service. So Sarah, I welcome you to be part of our congregation today here on the outskirts of metropolitan Hillsborough. We look forward to your message and guidance in today's service. Well, before we create our time for worship, let's take a moment to share important announcements. First, there's really a good time to check your cell phone. I just did mine to make sure it's in worship mode. We will also enjoy our coffee time after the service in the library. And it's such a beautiful day, we can spread out in the building and even outside now that the rain and the storm has passed. and continue our conversations there. Masks continue to be optional. I see very few people are wearing them on a regular basis, but they're certainly still optional. And if you are wearing a mask and you want to come to the microphone and give an announcement, please speak loudly and clearly, particularly if you're wearing a mask, so that those of us who are mostly lip readers can still hear you. So please come to the mic and share any announcements for the good of the community. Anyone?
So I just want to say again that if somebody drove a red car, it was parked along, is that yours? There was smoke coming out of the trunk.
It does, and it has a word on the engine.
Okay, just making sure you knew about it.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So, Pam Dickens, who's broken her leg in 2 places, she is now in rehab, and it's in Graham. It's in a nursing home in Graham, and I went to visit her. She's doing all right, but she said the food there is terrible, and she could use some healthy vegetarian food. So if anybody would like to come and deliver her some food, I'm sure she'd be really happy to get that, and I can give you more info later. And secondly, AC, I'm coordinating the rides for AC, and we need more people to drive AC coming up in October. There's several weeks available, so thank you.
Good morning. My name is Lou Goodall. I got something through my email that is from North Carolina Senator Greg Meyer, and it's entitled "Authoritarianism Comes to North Carolina, Not an Exaggeration." If you're interested, I have copies of that I can give to you after the service.
If there are no more announcements, and with our cell phones already in worship mode, let us now put our hearts and minds into that same worship mode and prepare ourselves for worship experience together. Let's begin with our worship together with the lighting of our chalice, the symbol of our UU commitment and passion to each other and for social justice in the world. This is a chalice lighting by Rebecca Savage. We light our flaming chalice as a beloved people, united in love and thirsting for restorative justice. May it melt away the tethers that uphold whiteness in our midst. May it spark in us a spirit of humility. May it ignite in us radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly toward our highest ideals.
The call to worship for today is called Benediction to Build a World by Atina O'Danner, and I invite you to read the words in italics together. In what world are you powerful?
In this world, we can build people power together.
In what world do you act on knowledge and truth?
In this world, we can learn and move toward justice together.
In what world do you hold to your values in the face of what scares you?
In this world, we can affirm each other's resolve to do right together.
In what world are you confident in your worth?
In this world, we can affirm that each of us is enough.
In what world do faith and beliefs guide your choices?
Together, we can build this world.
In what world could you learn from those with less power?
Together, we can build this world.
In what world could empathy shield you from judging others?
Together we can build this world.
In what world will your power plant roots and tend to branches and leaves?
Together we can build this world.
Please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 1020, Woyaya.
Heaven knows where we are going. We know we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the roads will be bloody and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we Thank you. Be seated. Before we begin our individual joys, concerns, and milestones, there are two shared seasonal celebrations, special holy days, that we want to recognize first. One is the beginning of Yom Kippur, the highest holy day of Judaism, which starts this evening at sunset. Self-reflection, repentance, and atonement are the highest goals of Yom Kippur. The other seasonal celebration this week, actually yesterday, is the autumnal equinox, the beginning of fall, the Earth's midway milepost between the summer and winter solstices. To celebrate this earthly milestone, we will call on the spirits of the four directions, and Heather Kraft will be leading the call, and I will be lighting the flames.
Which way is east? That way? Directionally challenged here. Okay. You can rise if you are able and face to the east, which I just found out is that way. Yes, cool. Spirit of the east, spirit of air, of morning and springtime, be with us as the sun rises in times of beginning, times of planting. Inspire us with the fresh breath of courage as we go forth into new adventures. Turn to the south, which is towards me. Spirit of the south, spirit of fire, of noontime and summer, be with us through the heat of the day and help us to be ever growing. Warm us with strength and energy for the work that awaits us. To the west, spirit of the west, spirit of water, of evening and autumn, be with us as the sun sets and help us to enjoy a rich harvest. Flow through us with a cooling, healing quietness and bring us peace. To the north, spirit of the north, spirit of earth, of nighttime and winter, be with us in the darkness, in the time of gestation. You may be seated.
Ours is a welcoming community. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. This is hymn number 73, the Chant for the Seasons. We'll do just the autumn, which is the first verse. Time has turned the star wheel, autumn is upon us. Summertime has turned the star wheel, autumn is upon us. Time is twinkling sun, sweet upon the air, the smell of bloom is rising. Summertime has turned the star wheel, autumn is upon us. Glorious the trees, glorious the sight of frosted falling. Summertime has turned the star wheel, autumn is upon us. Now, ours is a welcoming community where we find connection, a sharing community where our joys are celebrated, and a caring community where our sorrows are lessened. Each Sunday we take some time to reflect on the special happenings that have occurred this week among our members and friends. Some choose to share aloud, while others choose to remain silent. Here we make room for both. So for those of you who would like to share aloud, please take a moment before you begin, center yourself, collect your thoughts, so that what you have to share this morning is personal, heartfelt, and brief. So now, please come forward to the side mic, tell us your name, share what is in your heart. When you're finished, you may release a stone into the vase on the altar. And for those of you joining us online who would like to share your joys or concerns with us, please put it in the chat and tell us if you would like to have it read aloud, and we'll drop a stone for you. So please come forward now. those of you who would prefer to silently acknowledge your joys and concerns remaining in your heart, I invite you to come to the altar and release a stone into the vase in silence while Aviva plays Voice Still and Small. And after she plays it through one time, we're all invited to join in singing this meditative song. Words are printed in your order of service. Still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, we hold all these things within the heart of this community, both spoken and unspoken, by remaining silent for a moment as we consider what has been shared and how we might respond. Now let us close together with an amen and blessed be. Amen. Blessed be. And now let's sing our children to class with the children's blessing, which is in the back of your gray hymnal. Your mind be open to learning, may your lips bring truth into the world. May your heart know love and your hands do the work of justice as you go your way in peace. May your mind be open to learning, may your lips bring truth into the world. May your heart know love and your hands do the work of justice as you go your way in peace. As you go your way in
Today's reading is titled We Hold On by Teresa Soto. There is a moment before dawn when the night is firmly in charge of the sky. There is no arguing with the opacity that holds both a fertile imagination and cover of destruction. Just hold on. There is a moment when the dream we share is newly born, wet and wriggling in our hands. Sometimes it's true that salvific futures look vulnerable and small before us. We remain unsure. Just hold on. Anything good was small at first. You know that Dr. King said, I have a dream. It definitely was not the I have a reality speech. It was real in a different way that could be felt, that could be shared. They held on. That dreaming speech happened in August 1963, and you know what came before was April, a letter from a Birmingham jail. One moment did inform the other, but the future being built could not be known with certitude. They held on. We gather, Unitarian Universalists, certain only of our power to be human, finding ourselves committed to keeping our word and being our covenant. And when we fail to keep our promises, we don't throw them away, labeled as impossible. We take up our courage, we begin again. We hold on. Sprinkled in the wind, we can hear the question, if we are not white supremacy shaped into religious robes and rituals, then who are we? We are present both in attention and in the answer. We are here, we hold on. We contain multitudes, not just of questions and contradictions, but also of possibilities. We continue to labor for the creation of community in which all of us, not just each, but every part of us, is welcome in our home of faith. We hold on. Hello, beloveds. I am Sarah Clark Parnell, and I am so thankful for your kind invitation to be here today. Today, I will be speaking about something I am really excited about, and I hope that you will be too. My topic today is the proposed adoption of an eighth principle by individual UU churches. With that in mind, I would like to do a few things in this sermon. First, I want to unpack the eighth principle itself and think about what it means to our congregations. Second, I'd like to address some questions I imagine y'all might have, such as, should we even bother to adopt the eighth principle, considering the revision of Article 2 that is currently under works? How does a congregation adopt the eighth principle? And what are some concrete steps congregations can take to live into the eighth principle? Lastly, I will explain how the eighth principle is like a cupcake. Some of you may be thinking, 8 principles? I thought there are only 7. Well, you aren't wrong. There are only 7 principles formally recognized by the Unitarian Universalist Association. If you happen to be totally new here and have no idea what I'm talking about, first of all, welcome. We are glad you are here. Second of all, I promise I will try not to get too insider baseball-y on you. In that spirit, let me start with a refresher of our 7 principles. Article 2 of our bylaws reads, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, 3, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. These 7 principles form the covenant to which UU congregations pledge themselves. Let me ask you this. Do you have a favorite principle? If you do, you are welcome to just shout it out.
Inherent worth and dignity of each person.
Inherent worth and dignity. Anyone else?
Interdependent web.
Interdependent web. That one, okay. Okay. All right, very cool. So what is this about an 8th principle? The 8th principle is a grassroots movement to adopt an additional principle. The text of the 8th principle reads, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. There's a lot there, so I'm going to read it one more time. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. That's a lot of information. So let's start with how the 8th principle came to be. The 8th principle was dreamed up by Paula Cole-Jones and Bruce Pollock Johnson in 2013. Paula Cole-Jones is a facilitator of anti-racism trainings, a former president of DRUM, which stands for Diverse and Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Multicultural Ministries, and a member of the UUA Article 2 Commission, which I will talk about later on. Paula Cole-Jones realized that many congregations were, quote, following the 7 principles without thinking about or dealing with racism and other oppressions at the systemic level. The 8th principle came from a feeling that we need something to renew our commitment to anti-racism work, to hold ourselves accountable, and to fulfill the potential of our existing principles, unquote. Let's break down some of the component pieces of the 8th principle. The 8th principle talks about building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community. Beloved community is a term that was popularized by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The 8th principle website explains, quote, beloved community happens when people of diverse racial, ethnic, educational, class, gender, abilities, sexual orientation, backgrounds, and identities come together in an interdependent relationship of love, mutual respect, and care that seeks to realize justice within the community and in the broader world, end quote. In many UU churches, the values of diversity, respect, love, and care are already part of the culture. I did a little snooping, and I found out that this church is a welcoming congregation, meaning y'all have done the work of radical inclusion and affirmation of LGBTQ folks within these walls. And I don't know about you, but this sounds an awful lot like building beloved community to me. The 8th principle goes on to talk about accountably dismantling racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. I'm going to get really real with y'all for a minute and talk about the word accountably. Some people just don't like it. And I should say that we are being asked to adopt the 8th principle as is without changing any of its language. Since the word accountably isn't going anywhere, it's important to really understand what it means. In today's reading, the poet Teresa Soto writes, you know that Dr. King said, I have a dream. It definitely was not the I have a reality speech. Adopting the 8th principle is a dream. It doesn't automatically make beloved community a reality, and that's where accountability comes in. Going back to the 8th principle website, it explains, quote, white UUs hold themselves accountable to communities of color to make sure they do what they say they will do. Black UUs hold each other accountable and help each other see and dismantle signs of internalized racism. And I can understand why this might be daunting. What if we do it wrong? What if we get kicked out for making a mistake? Could we be kicked out of the congregation? If you are feeling tension rise within yourself, I invite you to take a deep breath in and out. The good news is that we are not called to be perfect here. And as I was reminded recently, perfectionism is a tool of white supremacy culture anyway. When we do it wrong, when we inevitably make mistakes, or as today's reading says, when we fail to keep our promises, we don't throw them away, labeled as impossible, we take up our courage, we begin again. Accountability might be scary, but together, you can dream up a system of accountability that works for your congregation. Ultimately, it is simply a way of helping us keep our promises and of beginning again when we get it wrong. The 8th principle calls out one type of oppression by name, and only one, and that is racism. Why call out racism and not say transphobia or ableism? This is a really good question and a hard question. It's hard because it forces us to look at the really ugly parts of our history as both a country and a religious movement. I am convicted by the idea that racism is America's original sin. Author Jim Wallace writes, quote, "The United States of America was established as a white society, founded upon the genocide of another race and then the enslavement of yet another," end quote. This is a really painful truth. It is another painful truth that the history of Unitarianism, Universalism, and Unitarian Universalism has not been free from the sin of racism either. Racism, unfortunately, touches everything in our society, including other oppressions. Because of this, it is appropriate to name it specifically. Naming it, however, should not be a source of shame. Instead, it's an opportunity. The truth is that racism hurts all of us, even us white people. Dismantling racism stands to benefit all of us. I want to talk a little bit about why I am so passionate and excited about the possibility of congregations adopting the 8th principle. I have 3 children, twin 6-year-olds and an almost 3-year-old, all girls, and they are biracial. Racial justice is therefore a deeply personal issue for me. Last year at kindergarten, my kids experienced their first overtly racist act directed at them. A little boy in my daughter Peyton's class told her she couldn't play because she didn't have white skin. It was heartbreaking, but hardly unexpected. And yet, if I'm honest, I didn't expect it. I'm confident my surprise reflected my white privilege. And I'm sharing this story with you all not to try and convince you that racism is alive and well, something that I know you know already, but instead to try and let y'all into my life a little bit and let you know where my mind is at. I selfishly want congregations to adopt the 8th principle because I want everything for my children, including churches in which they can bring every part of themselves, including their racial identity. This may already be that type of congregation. If so, adopting the 8th principle would be both an affirmation of who you already are and a promise about who you can become. Now, to answer some questions y'all might have. First of all, how would a congregation adopt the 8th principle? Typically, a congregation would adopt the 8th principle after a period of discernment through a church-wide vote. Can you just do that? Is that allowed? The short answer is yes, you can. The slightly longer answer is yes, you can, because UU congregations have what is called congregational polity. When I was Googling how to explain what polity is, I came across an article that referred to polity as one of those hardcore, geeky religious words, which I think is accurate. Congregational polity means that each congregation is self-governing, so the bottom line is that if you choose to do so, you can adopt the 8th principle. You do not have to wait for the 8th principle to be adopted at the national level. I would like to encourage y'all just to begin to be curious about that possibility. There is nothing you need to commit to at this moment except curiosity. Who else has adopted the 8th principle? Over 230 congregations have adopted the 8th principle, and more adopt it every month. In addition, the organization BLUE, which stands for Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, and the organization DRUM, which I talked about earlier, both endorse the 8th principle. But what about the Article 2 revision? How does this affect the adoption of the 8th principle? Should we even bother? Many of you are probably familiar with the Article 2 Study Commission, but if you are not, let me speak to it briefly. The bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association state that we must review our principles and purposes every 15 years. A group of folks called the Article 2 Study Commission have been working over the past several years to accomplish this task. Their proposed revision was just voted on at General Assembly, where delegates voted to enable another year of study and revision of Article 2. The final revisions will be voted on at next year's General Assembly, and it looks like it will pass. 2 things you need to know about the revision. 1, much of the language of the 8th principle has been woven into the new principles and purposes. And 2, the principles as a written list are no longer included. The question this leaves is, therefore, is it still worth it to adopt the 8th principle? I argue, yes, it is still worth it. In many ways, the 8th principle movement is analogous to the Welcoming Congregations program. It is a powerful way to publicly declare a church's commitment to anti-racism. I believe the designation of being an 8th principle church will continue to have power and utility even after the Article 2 revisions are passed. So, you adopt the 8th principle. Now what? What work can be done in the spirit of anti-racism? This is a great question, and one we could have a whole other sermon on. One very practical step congregations can engage in is a racial justice audit. This means taking a close look at all aspects of congregational life and noting what is going well and what could be improved on in terms of racial justice and equity. There is a rubric already made up to help you do this, so you don't have to start from scratch. Congregations can also support members in doing the hard work to unlearn the internal biases we all carry. The good news is that there are a lot of resources out there to engage in this work. There are anti-racist reading lists available to draw from, such as the one from Ibram X. Kendi. There are also organizations that help institutions and individuals to develop the skills necessary to become anti-racist. One such organization is the Black-owned Racial Equity Institute, and they offer virtual and in-person trainings in this area. One final suggestion is to follow the lead of Black and Indigenous-led organizations fighting for justice in our communities and join in the struggle. The work is already being done. The trick is to figure out how to plug into and support this work. There are lots of other ways your congregation can live into the 8th principle, and I encourage y'all to tap into the wisdom of other churches who are doing this work. Now, I promised I would talk about cupcakes. There is a relationship advice columnist named Dan Savage. Some of you may have heard of him. He is not by any means a perfect or unproblematic person, but I heard him say something once that has stayed with me. He said that when you come out to someone, you should come out like you are offering them something delicious and exciting, like a cupcake, as opposed to something somber and scary. When I decided I wanted to talk about the 8th principle, I immediately thought about this advice. To me, the 8th principle is a cupcake. It is delicious and exciting. There is nothing about it we need to fear. So here I am, handing this cupcake over to y'all. What you do with it is up to you, and I invite you to consider the possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was delicious and instructional and challenging, all the same thing. At this time, each Sunday, we take a monetary offering which supports our social justice work in Orange County communities. This month, our plate goes to New Hope Elementary School, to a special fund that helps students and their families who are facing special challenges and needs. Please donate by placing a check or cash in the offering plate. If by check, please write plate in the memo line. You can also go to our website, uuchnc.org, click on the donate button, or you can use the QR code printed in your order of service. Thank you for your generosity. Now, Aviva will offer our offering, our offertory music.